If you have a child between the age of 10 to 14, you might have plenty of questions. There are many changes that happen at this transitional period between being a child and moving into the teenage years. Firstly, these changes might lead to a few things. Lack of the basics. This includes the lack of good sleep hygiene and unhealthy eating habits. Often parents can feel like that they've lost a bit of control over the basics as your child gets older. Your tween might not listen to you or to your partner about the basics anymore. And secondly, these changes might lead to out of character emotional outbursts, and this happens when their emotional cup is a bit too full. What this means is your child has too many emotions and not enough logic to process or deal with these emotions. One thing that is certain is there are many expected changes for kids that happen at this age. So let's try to see the world from a 13-year-old's point of view. There are lots of changes that happen to a preteen's body and also the brain. Besides all the physical changes that are obvious to the naked eye, the brain also goes through major physiological changes. The brain starts changing in the early teenage years, and that continues through to the mid-20s. This process of change in the brain is called pruning, which is restructuring the brain based on the task that the neurons are used for. What this means, it means that any neurons that we've used for the tasks are going to stay. The ones that are not being used will be kind of getting rid of. And this starts from the back to the front of the brain. The most frontal part of the brain, which is known as the prefrontal cortex, goes through these changes last, which happens in the mid-20s. This part of the brain governs things such as decision making and gives your child the capacity to understand the consequences of their choices. It helps them with decision making and how to work through issues and impulse control. The emotional part, though, it develops much earlier than the logical part of the brain. Teenagers might use their emotional brain more than adults do to make decisions and to problem solve, as their prefrontal cortex hasn't developed fully just yet. The emotional part is linked to the feelings, irrational behavior, hostility, and instinct. That's why sometimes you think that your teenager is starting to appear like an adult, but they might not act like one. This is due to the fact that their brain is still under construction and their intellectual capabilities have not yet developed. At this stage, they start to create their own sense of identity. Their sense of identity is still very fluid and starting to develop. There is a separation of looking at themselves as an individual and becoming independent, and the part of the brain that is responsible for this becomes highly activated at this age. So they may start caring about others' opinions more and trying to fit in socially. From this comes peer pressure and being accepted by the crowd. Another thing is socially. Socially, they might have a heightened focus on themselves and how others might perceive them. This might cause some anxiety for some teenagers, and they might think now that they are at the center of attention from their peers and people around them. Besides focusing and having attention on themselves, there's another major change that happens in the environment for this age, which is the transition from primary to high school. When the brain and the body and the identity is going through major changes to the environment adds to this pressure for this age group. Examples can include school being very structured and causing stress, and also the change of having different teachers for each subject in high school. So now, imagine if all these changes were to happen in your life, would you be overwhelmed? Is this how your tween might be feeling? And in part 2, we are going to talk through some solutions that you can do at home or with your child to be able to deal with these things.